Let's talk about some beginner tips for buying boots for the outdoors. I've been getting a lot of requests lately for help, or for advice, for people buying boots, and a lot of times it's from folks that either hadn't bought many boots before or were looking for boots for a specific purpose that they hadn't bought before, or that maybe weren't happy with previous purchases and want to know what to do better. So I wanted to just lay out a few basics here today and describe some of the boots and types of boots I like for working outdoors. In my spare time, I run a tree farm in some very rugged, steep terrain, and over the years of doing that, I've developed a list of likes and don't likes for boots, and a list of what's necessary, maybe what's not, and what's desirable and what's not, and I want to share those with you. So let's start now with my favorite boot, my go-to boot for all purposes outside. And it's kind of the my basic boot that I wear in the woods most of the time, and that's this thing. This is a Irish Setter Comfort Trek 8-inch lace-up boot. Bad news is you can't buy these anymore. I bought this pair, I think, 12 years ago. I actually bought 2 pairs of these at that time. They were a great deal. I loved the first pair so much, I just ordered the second pair right away. That first one took me 5 or 6 years to wear out, and ever since then I've been working on this pair. Now, while you can't buy this particular boot anymore, let me show you what I like about this so that you can find a boot that's pretty similar that will hopefully serve you really well in the field. The first thing I will say is this is a good, sturdy leather boot. And again, you just kind of have to get a feel for that. Use your hands to get a sense of what the leather's like. A good leather is going to feel kind of firm. I like to feel a little bit oily, almost a little stiff. Honestly, a good leather, when it's new, should require some breaking in. There's some boot lines, like Thorogood in particular, that really pride themselves in having a leather that doesn't take long to break in. And that's fine. Thorogoods are great boots, but I do prefer to have some stiffness in my boots when they're new. And then again, as they break in, they mold to your foot. So you want to start with a good leather. And one of the reasons for that is these things they're what's protecting you when you're out there. Protecting you from things falling on you and from rolling your ankle, and honestly from where we are, from snakes and things like that. So I want to have a nice leather. The second thing is, and this is maybe more important than the leather, is the lining. I like unlined boots. That means basically that when you look inside the boot, like you look inside this, you see the inside of the layer the inside of the leather that's on the outside of the boot. There's no synthetic or textile materials in here. Leather breathes really well. I get hot feet. Unlined boots keep my feet happy. A lot of boots out there that do have linings, you'll see like a synthetic textile lining in them, and then typically around that there's a waterproofing membrane that's basically a plastic bag. And hey, those are great for waterproofing, but if you don't need that waterproofing, it's just a way to make your feet really hot, honestly, and I don't like that. So again, if you want the waterproofing membrane, go for it. But if you're somebody like me that would rather have a little bit of wet feet than to have hot feet, go with the unlined version. Now, sometimes you will see a work boot that has a leather lining. That's a little more unusual in work boots. You see that a lot in cowboy boots. You'll see they'll have like a calfskin or pigskin lining. That's fine too. That breathes well. But so I would stick to either an unlined boot or a leather lined boot. Again, you're not going to find too many leather lined work boots. So we've got, again, good leather, unlined. The next thing you want to look at is the welt. And this has what's called a Goodyear welt, so you can see the stitching down the side of the boot. Goodyear welts and a few other kind of welts make a boot resolable. Now, if you buy a boot for a great deal, if you buy for less than $100 or something, you're probably not going to want to resole it because it's not worth that much money. These boots here, I have resoled. And you can resole them because of the Goodyear welt. And again, there are other welts that let you resole them, but the Goodyear welt is the most common today. So if you're going to spend $300 on a pair of boots and you're going to go through the hassle of breaking them in, it's nice to have a pair of boots that you can put a new sole on. These boots right here have been resoled. The original sole that came on these boots, it delaminated soon after I started wearing them. It just fell apart between the midsole and the outsole. Probably because they sat in my closet for 5 or 6 years while I wore out the previous pair. But the interesting thing is, I took them to the cobbler, had this new pair of soles put on. They're a Vibram sole. It's a great sole. They're more comfortable now than they were originally. This is a good sole. A lot of shock absorption. I love them. So hey, if you've got a pair of boots that you really like the leather, you like how they look, they're broken in, but your feet get sore after 2 or 3 hours of wearing. Before you throw those things away, I'd talk to a cobbler about getting them resold, because it may make all the difference in the world. So in addition to the welt, let's talk about the outsole. I like a good, chunky, deep lugged outsole. And this is about as chunky and deep lugged as it gets. This is essential for working outdoors on a terrain like where my tree farm is, where you're up and down all the time. These nice square edges here just bite. I get so used to having a good sole like this that when I don't, it's disaster. A few weeks ago, I was out working and I had a problem with a good pair of boots and had to quit using them for the day and had to use just an extra pair of boots I had sitting around that were kind of more of a wedge sole, and I spent the rest of that day sliding around on my rear. You just don't appreciate how much a sole like this helps you until you've used one for a while, and then you switch to one that's not deep lugged. And again, and the heel contributes to that too. I don't currently have a nice, real thick logger heel set of boots. Maybe my next lace-ups will be that way. But you can see here, this has a nice square edge on the heel, and it's a pretty deep heel, and it does a lot for holding you on the side of a hill. Just really, I can't say enough about how good these soles are. And again, deep lugs, nice square edges, that's the way to go in my mind. So that's what I like to look for in a pair of lace-up boots. And honestly, where I work on my tree farm, I wear the lace-ups more than slip-ons because these keep my foot in place. All right, and again, when you're working on a hill all day, it's nice to keep your foot secure so your weight's not all on your toes. So again, nice stiff leather, unlined, resolable, and a good deep lugged sole. That's my go-to boot. Now, if you're a sucker for the slip-ons, which I certainly am, you want to look for something like this. This is my favorite pair of slip-ons for working in the woods. This is a Double H brand Jayden model. That's a Jeyden, I believe. Pardon me if I misspelled that. But the Jayden is just a great model for working outside. It's a very comfortable boot. I love Double H's for slip-on boots. It's hard to beat them. You can see this boot here. I work in the woods probably a third of the time with this. This is good, strong leather that has just really weathered the briars well. Actually, I just found a thorn stuck in here, right? And it barely penetrated at all. This has been a good, hard, firm leather. And actually, again, if I'm working out somewhere where it could be snaky, these are my favorite pair. There's some double layer here with this vamp, again, which, should I get struck by a snake, hopefully this would do a better job than most boots. So like I said, it's got a good strong layer, a good strong leather on the outside. This does have the Goodyear welt. You can't see the stitching because the boots are kind of dirty, but it does have the Goodyear welt. It's got a pretty good lugged surface, or good lugged sole on the bottom. It's not as good as my lace-ups, but it's pretty good. And it's rather good for a slip-on boot too. And then you can see it's got a nice, steep, thick heel on it here. Love these boots. The only bad thing about these boots is they're lined. I don't know if you can see from the camera. There is that textile lining tag right there that says waterproof, and they are waterproof. I've crossed some pretty deep water with them. They've done a good job. They don't leak. Can't complain about that. But they're hot. They are hot. The biggest reason I don't wear them more is they are hot. The other thing that I really don't care for about these particular boots is that if you're out there working all day, 5 or 6 hours, 8 hours working on steep hills, at the end of the day, my toes are sore because that's what's bearing my weight. They're sliding forward in these. Now, there are slip-on boots out there that do a better job of catching my instep right here. A good pair of slip-on boots should do that. They say they should feel like a firm handshake on your instep. These are not bad. They're not the sloppiest boots I've got, but they don't hold the instep of my foot in place as well as some. If you find a pair of slip-on boots that do hold your instep in place really well and that do have the heavy lug bottom, go for it. That could be a really great pair of boots. So again, I love these. Pretty good outsole, great strong leather, reasonable hold on my foot. Don't care for the synthetic lining, but on most points these are great. Jayden Double H's. All right, now I mentioned earlier that I do a lot of work or maybe I didn't mention, but I do a lot of work on the tree farm, maintaining trails, and a lot of times there's creek crossings, and this is the boot I wear when I'm working in the water a lot. Again, you know, if you are going to be working in the water for a while, it makes sense to have a rubber boot on so that you're not getting soaked feet. And this is a good one to go. I'll tell you what I like about this boot more than your real cheap boots. You can go to Tractor Supply or wherever and buy a $20 rubber boot that's just kind of sloppy and your foot's flopping around in there all the time and it's uncomfortable to wear. This is a lot better boot for a couple of reasons, and one is it tapers here on the ankle. So you've got the snug ankle fit that holds your foot in place much better. You can walk for hours in these boots, and they're pretty comfortable. And again, it's because of this ankle fit. And also, it's got a pretty good sole on it. You know, it's got a nice square edge on the heel here that does, if you're running up and down stream banks, this keeps you from falling, from slipping. I like that a lot. I wouldn't go working in the woods with these for hours because those briars and thorns and stuff are going to cut your rubber eventually. So that's, I try to avoid getting these out in the woods as much as possible. These are Itasca. These are, I think, what Itasca would call the Itasca mid-grade boot. It's about a $40 boot at Tractor Supply. I think they're worth the $40. I've had good luck with these for 2 or 3 years. I'll tell you, the reviews on the internet are not great. They do tend to fall apart after a few years. I've already done some repairs here. I had a piece that came loose and I had to glue it back in place. But in general, I can't complain. These have treated me well. Again, the ankle fit is the key. I would recommend looking at the Sportsman's Guide. I think they've got the best deals going on this type of boot. Their store brand ankle fit boots are a phenomenal buy. They probably or may not have as good of a sort of a grippy sole as these. I think it varies from year to year, but I've had some really good boots that they made, and they've also got varying levels of insulation. These you can see in here. There's you can see this little shoulder here. These have some insulation in the bottom, and this is a minimal amount. You can get a lot. Again, these boots don't breathe anyhow, so you might as well get them insulated because your feet are going to be hot. And if you're going to be working somewhere in cold water in the middle of the winter, might as well get some insulation, right? So anyhow, I'm a big fan of these boots. The Itascas are okay. The Sportsman's Guide store brand are really good. I'd recommend checking those out. Finally, I want to talk about a pair of boots that is my favorite, just, let's say, jack of all trades boots for people on a budget. This boot here, and this is actually my son's boot, not mine. This is a Wellco USMC rat boot. Rat stands for rugged all-terrain. And this boot violates basically every rule I've laid down about buying boots. But when you put them all together, this is a great pair of boots, particularly for the price. I think I paid $70 for these. And again, the price online varies a lot. There are Wellcos, and then Danner also makes these. The price varies from brand to brand. It varies from month to month. This is the temperate model. There's actually a warm weather model that's got some holes in it here where it's not waterproof. It pumps out moisture. Those are a little cheaper. There's actually, I think, a cold weather version that's a little more insulated. They may be more expensive. The temperate is my favorite. Now, again, to tell you, what I don't like about it, or wouldn't like about it, for starters, it's lined. It's got that textile fabric lining with a waterproofing membrane all around it, and I don't care for it. But at the same time, they are waterproof. It's got a gusseted tongue. And again, I think probably because it's not a full leather boot, it breathes pretty well, so my feet don't get overly hot in them, and they're waterproof. Secondly, as I mentioned, it's not all leather, which I said earlier. Hey, I like a good stiff leather. These aren't. You got some leather here. Some of this is like nubuck here and here and here. And then on the toe and heel, I'm not entirely sure what this material is. I think this is leather with something of like an abrasion, a resistant polymer coating. It works really well. It's quite stiff. But you can see this stuff doesn't get scratched at all by the briars and thorns out there. It does a great job, honestly. And then you've got this heavyweight nylon here, which basically this is the same stuff you find in briar-proof clothing. It's wonderful. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking, as they say. So when you put it all together, it's a great boot. The soles, in the outsole, it's deeply lugged. Now, it does not have that nice square heel, and these don't hold on a hill as well as my leather boots, but it's close. They're really good. They've actually got kind of like a beveled shape to the bottom that also helps to hold your place, to give you better traction, and I think it actually kind of helps distribute your weight better. These are, I will tell you, these are the coolest boots to wear that I've ever had, because the first time you put them on, it's kind of like wearing a sneaker, really. But you got this nice, heavy, durable outsole on them. You've got the support of a pretty good upper. The one thing that I don't care for is there's not a lot of protection here. You know, if you got like if a snake struck you, I don't think this nylon's going to do much for the fangs. I've never been struck by a snake, so why do I worry, right? But if somebody said to me, "Hey, again, I got $100. What's the best boot I can get for $100?" I don't even think I wouldn't think about it for a minute. I'd say these. Go get you some USMC wrap boots, Wellco or Danner. I don't have a brand preference. You can't go wrong. And the other nice thing is there's virtually no break-in time on these. From what I've read, this was kind of introduced as a military's way of bringing about a really good performance combat boot that works for young folks that hadn't really grown up wearing boots. And you can tell you put them on. It, like I said, it's kind of like a high-tech sneaker, ready to go on day one. So, give me some comments. What boots would you like to hear me talk about? Again, I'm not here to do those unboxing videos. There's plenty of places on YouTube where they do that. I'd really like to talk about boots I've owned and how they've worked and recommendations I can make. We've owned a lot of boots in this family. I got a bunch sitting around, so maybe I'll have a pair that you'd like to hear about. Or maybe suggest, hey, go buy a pair of these and see how you like them. I could try that. Just leave me some comments. Let me know what you think. Thanks for stopping by now. Bye.